Hey guys, Girl About Library, and I'm here today with a wrap-up of my November reading. I'm feeling extra wintry today because it snowed in South Texas, which is where I live, and that is insane. That hadn't happened in a decade here, and I'll insert a picture here of my son frolicking in the snow because he was the cutest, and it was just such an amazing experience. You do not wake up in the morning thinking that the snow will just be everywhere here. That never happens, and so super excited about it. Still feeling wintry, even though the temperatures have returned to the 60s, but that is okay. You cannot take the snow away from me. I will continue to pretend that it is winter temperatures outside. I read 6 books during the month of November, which was really exciting for me. I had a hard reading month in October. It just wasn't going well. I was pressuring myself to read instead of being on social media, which I talked about in a video, and I will link that above and below. But basically, I felt like I couldn't put my phone down. November rolled around and I put in some pretty strict things for myself to try and keep myself from just staring at my phone all the time, because you only get to live one time, and that seems like such a wasteful way to spend it. And so I put my phone far away from me so that I couldn't reach it, and that worked out really well. I also used a technique that a subscriber and also someone who has an amazing channel, Krista, recommended from Books and Jams. And she said that she will set her phone for 20 minutes as a timer, and she has to do a specific thing for 20 minutes, and then she can do something else for the next 20. So I would read for 20 minutes, and then I would allow myself 20 minutes to do social media or whatever, and then I would come back to reading. And that worked out really well too. Both of those ideas together made for a really good reading month for me. I read 6 books in the month of November, and some of these books were hunkers, and there were also books that had been on my TBR list for a really long time, and it is such a good feeling to get those books read. In total, I read 2,890 pages in the month of November, but for the record, 1,000 of those were A Column of Fire, which is a book I mostly listened to over the course of September, October, and November, although the bulk of it was in November. So that comes out to about 96 pages a day. Again, a lot of that's A Column of Fire, but it's still, I'm happy with it. I'm happy that I put my phone down and I was focusing on things that I really want to focus on instead of Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and Snapchat and blah. So, in no particular order, we're going to go through these books, and I'm going to tell you what I thought of them. First up is They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera. This is a book I was really excited to read. I'd heard a lot of good things about it, and I'd watched a lot of other people review this book. And so I went in with a little bit of hype, but also a pretty good idea of what to expect for the book. And it lived up to those expectations. I think for me, this one just emotionally missed the mark. If you're not familiar with the plot of this book, basically it is about 2 teenagers who meet because they got a call from a service called Death Cast. And Death Cast basically calls you the day you're going to die at midnight and lets you know, which obviously is insane and would completely change the way we live our lives to think that you're going to be notified that day, because obviously now we have no idea when that's coming. And that's a huge thing. That's a huge new thing to have in the world, and it just felt like the characters didn't connect with that. This is their last day on Earth, and that's huge. And I didn't feel that from the characters. It didn't connect. And that was disappointing. But there were also parts of Adam Silvera's writing that I really enjoyed. So I do think I'll read another book by him. Oh, and I have 60-second book reviews for a lot of the books that I'm going to be discussing in this video. So I will link those above and below, and all the places where you can link things so that you can get kind of a condensed, quick version of my thoughts on these. Next up is Lab Girl by Hope Jaron. I'm obsessed with this book. I have made multiple videos about this book. They just haven't come out yet. But I loved this book. It is a nonfiction memoir about Hope Jaron and her life. She is a female botanist, and she's a research scientist. And so the book is about her life as a research scientist. It's also about this quirky relationship she has with her equally quirky lab assistant, Bill. And then there were these chapters that were just this really cool blend of philosophy and plant science that just felt super existential and quotable. I have a video coming out of like 5 quotes from the book that I'm obsessed with, because there were so many moments when I was reading where I had to like scribble down something she had written, because it was that good. This book had also been on my TBR list for an insanely long time, so it felt really good to read it and love it and be able to talk about it. I just really enjoyed Hope's writing. I don't think that you need to have a strong background in science to appreciate this book, because I don't. But I did spend 1 semester, or two semesters as a biology major. Didn't work out, became an English major real quick. But I think that helped me enjoy this book. But I don't think it's necessary. I think you could still really enjoy it even if you didn't have any background in science, because Hope's writing is just so good. I loved it, and I hope that she continues to write more books, because it was really impressive. I loved Lab Girl. After that, I read Paris for One by Jojo Moyes. I was contacted by the publisher and asked if I wanted to read this book, and I immediately was like, yes, sign me up. I cannot wait. I read the first book, Me Before You, that I had ever read of hers, when I had just given birth to my son. My love for that book and those characters and the writing just got me like back into reading, and eventually led me to creating this channel. I know that Me Before You is kind of problematic, and I appreciate that. I can understand why some people don't like that book, but I do. I like Me Before You, I like Me After You, and I'm so excited that there's another book coming out in January, Still Me, that is by JoJo. But going back to the book that I read, Paris for One, it is a collection of short stories that she wrote. The first one is like the bulk of the book, and it is Paris for One. It is about a woman whose boyfriend is supposed to meet her in Paris, but he cancels at the last minute, and so she ends up like exploring Paris by herself. And it's totally unlike her. This is not somebody who goes on adventures. She's kind of a quiet person who tends to like be a homebody, which I completely relate to. And it was just so cute and sweet, and it reminded me why I loved Me Before You as much as I did. And really, all of the stories were good. The rest of them were like significantly shorter than the first one, but they all had like this cute little lesson or message in them, and I enjoyed reading this. I don't typically read short story collections, although I did read 2 this month, which is rare for me. Next was A Column of Fire, which like is my Everest. I have wanted to read this book for a really long time. Since it came out, I have had it like on hold from the library and had to return it and then gotten it back out again. It's just kind of been around for a while now, and so it felt really good to finish it this month. I read the other 2 books in this series, the Pillars of the Earth series, and they all are like a similar length as this book. They're all around 1,000 pages, and typically I would never read a book that long. I don't like really long books, but I liked those first 2 so much. Like, Ken Follett is the author, and he has this really unique to me way of blending historical facts in a way that are so intriguing that you forget how much history you're actually getting from the book. And so I have kind of like a blind spot for European history generally, which is bad. Public school failed me. But especially, like, I mean, these books start in the 1300s. So you're getting a piece of history that you don't get very often in historical fiction novels. This last one though, A Column of Fire, to me was not the same as the first 2. I did not like it as much. It was not a great read. I'm so glad that I'm done with it. This felt incredibly history heavy to me. It's about like the 1500s and kind of what was going on at the time as far as Catholicism and Protestantism, and it's a lot of history. And so in one way it was probably good for me, because my knowledge of like the late 1500s and history is real weak. And the ending for this was exciting in terms of like what books might come forward in the future, but overall this book was a drag for me to get through, and I would not recommend it. Next up is The City Maker's Guide to Country Living by Louise Miller. This is also a book that was sent to me by the publisher, and it was also super cute and a great way to get into like the Christmas spirit. Maybe it is what brought the snow. I don't know. This book follows a woman named Olivia, and she is a pastry chef living in Boston, and she has like a work incident where she accidentally lights the place on fire, and embarrassed, she leaves. She goes to Vermont to visit a friend, and when she is there, she applies for a job at Sugar Maple, I think is what it's called. I don't know. Insert super cute name of inn here because that's what it was called. Anyway, she gets a job there, and she kind of just like totally embraces this country life. In the 60-second book review, I mentioned that it kind of reminded me of a Lifetime movie, and I stick by that. This book is such Lifetime movie vibes, or Hallmark, your pick, whichever team you're on. There's snow and romance and Christmas cookies, and I did like though that like there wasn't as much cheesy acting because like it was playing out in my mind and it wasn't cheesy the way I was imagining it. But it was really cute. I liked the book, and I'm excited that there's more coming from Louise Miller. I think she has a book coming out in 2018 early, and so I'm excited to read that too. I think you have to be in the right mood for a book like this. Like I tend to read a lot of like darker books like historical fiction and thrillers and like suspense. And so reading a book like this is definitely a huge change of pace, and so you kind of have to be in the mood for it. And I think that this is a great way to get into like the holiday spirit and mood. And so if you're looking for a book like that, City Baker's Guide is a great way to do it. Next up is The Kitchen House by Kathleen Grissom. I picked this book up because April at Getting Hooked With It really liked it. I will link her channel down below. She is amazing. We have very similar reading tastes, and so usually when she likes a book, I really like it. And so I picked up The Kitchen House to see if I would like it as much as she did. And I did really enjoy this book. I had some minor issues with it, which we will talk about in a second. If you're not familiar with this book, it is about a girl named Lavinia, and she becomes an orphan. Her family is being transported to Virginia. I can't remember where from, but to Virginia. And in the course of that very long boat ride, her parents die. And her brother like is traded off somewhere else. And so she is an indentured servant to the captain, and he takes her to his plantation in Virginia. When she gets there, they kind of pass her off to the slaves who are on the plantation, and she begins to identify with them as her family. At the same time though, she's white, and she identifies as well with the captain and his family as her family. And so it was this really complicated social dynamic that as a child was incredibly hard for her to navigate, and now as an adult is even harder because she is fairly naive and doesn't really get what's going on and how complicated all of this is. So overall, I really enjoyed this book. Kathleen's writing, like I couldn't put it down. It was really good until like the last 20 pages. And I'm gonna get on like a teeny tiny soapbox here for 1 second. Let me start by saying I realized like in the scope of what this book is about, which is slavery, the petty sounding thing that I have about to say, like I realize that it is small in comparison to the great amount of suffering that is depicted in this book. And this might be there's like a small amount of spoiler here that I'm about to discuss. So if you don't like want to hear that, skip ahead. I'll leave a timestamp down below so that you can skip past this part. I mean, it's not going to ruin your experience reading this book. I know it might ruin mine. So for the last half of the book, Lavinia has a guy who she's kind of like on and off with. For a variety of reasons, Lavinia and this man don't get together. They're not husband and wife. And he goes on to marry someone else. In the last like 20 or so pages of the novel, it is mentioned multiple times that his wife is pregnant, and they're very concerned about her because her hands are swelling and her feet are swollen and her legs are swollen. She's not doing well in her pregnancy. It is very obvious to me in 2017 that she has preeclampsia. Not as obvious to them, but she does mention that like her mom died of a similar condition. So again, it's definitely preeclampsia that she has, and more than likely she's gonna die as well. As a reader, I hated this decision by Kathleen Grissom. I had preeclampsia when I was pregnant, and I've never read a book where something that happened to me that was hard is used as a way to like manipulate the plot. And I mean that in that, like, as a reader, I'm supposed to want Lavinia and this guy to get together. It's disappointing that they're not. And it just felt like Kathleen was kind of like nudging, like winking, that like, I can't wink, that it was gonna work out, but like these two characters were gonna be able to be together. I can't get excited, and I don't appreciate the suggestion that I should be excited that these two characters are gonna get together because this woman is going to die of preeclampsia. Does that make sense? I don't know. Reading it, I couldn't believe it was happening. I was so mad. Like, it kept me up at night because I was just like, what? Like, you can't, no. There's this whole momentum that's building in the book, and you want these two characters to be together. And so it's hard not to miss what's happening. Like, going through Goodreads, there were lots of people who commented, and I haven't read the sequel, so I don't actually know if these characters are together. I kind of don't want to read the sequel, because if they are together, I'm not going to be happy about it. If they aren't together, still not going to be happy about it, because I still don't like the way all of it was handled at the end of the book. That is a very small part of the book, and definitely should not stop you from reading it. Overall, the book was good. I am glad I read it, but just had to step off my soapbox. That really bothered me. Comment down below if there are any books that you've read that like you felt kind of not exploited, but just use something that you have and like personally affected you in a way that made you feel like icky, I guess. I don't know. It's hard to describe, but it did really bother me. The end. So I think at the beginning of this video I said I read 6 books. I actually read 7 books. Because I'm counting as I'm doing this now at the end of the video, prepared. But I also read The Accusation by Bandy. I picked this one up because Mary over at Happily Ever Ash read it and enjoyed it. And I had never even heard of this book before, and I've uploaded my 60-second book review for this one, and again, I'll link that down below. And there have been a lot of people who have commented, like, how did I not know about this book? I also did not know about this book, so God bless BookTube and Happily Ever Ash for mentioning it. This is a book that is crazy and like super unique in that it is written by a man who lives in North Korea. His actual name is unknown, but he goes by the pen name of Bandy. And he's written all of these short stories. He is a writer in North Korea. And he wrote all of these short stories and then snuck them into South Korea. Once they got there, they were published and distributed, and it's fascinating. Like, this book was intensely fascinating to me, but it was also really, really hard for me to read, hard for me to get through. It's hard to even like talk about The Accusation in terms of like a literary critique, because it doesn't feel right. It doesn't seem fair. You know, Bandy wrote these and they're important, and he snuck them out of his country into another country so that they could be published. But as a reader, these were hard for me to get through, because it's very clear that they didn't go through an editing process that they would have, you know, in a literary way benefited from. The perspective kind of shifts a lot during the stories, and I don't know, it's just, they were hard for me to follow, like, what was going on. That aside, these stories are very interesting and important, and reading it, you just want to give Bandy a hug and let him know that, like, we see you, like, we see what is happening, because frequently in the book it felt like he was going out of his way to show us what this facade of North Korea, and how it seems like we're all so happy, but we're really not. And it made me wonder, does Bandy know how much we know? Which he probably, and he couldn't possibly, right? But it made me wonder how much he knows about how much we know. about North Korea and the terrible atrocities that happen there, that we're not being fooled by this seemingly perfect exterior. If you're interested in North Korea, I do think this is a really good book to read. But the stories themselves were a little hard for me to follow. So that is my reading from the month of November. 7 books, not 6. 7 books read, lots of pages, lots of books that I've been wanting to read for a long time, knocked off my TBR list, which is an amazing feeling. If you've read any of these books, comment down below, let me know what you thought of them, and comment down below letting me know what books you read in the month of November, and if there's any books that you think I should read as well. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day. Bye.